Captain Sarah Martinez adjusted her uniform one last time before stepping into Colonel Bradley's office. The morning sun streamed through the Venetian blinds, casting long shadows across the cluttered desk. She had been summoned without explanation, and the uncertainty made her stomach churn. "Captain Martinez, reporting as ordered, sir," she said, snapping to attention with practiced precision. Colonel Bradley looked up from his paperwork, his weathered face showing the strain of too many difficult decisions. "At ease, Captain. Please have a seat." Sarah settled into the chair across from his desk, maintaining perfect posture despite the informal invitation. 28 years old with 8 years of exemplary military service, she had earned her rank through determination and skill. Her record spoke for itself. Top marks in flight school, commendations for tactical excellence, and respect from her peers. Yet something in the colonel's expression suggested this meeting would not be about recognition. "Sarah, I'm going to be direct with you," Colonel Bradley began, removing his glasses and cleaning them slowly. "Command has made some decisions about base assignments, and I'm afraid you're not going to like what I have to tell you." The words hit her like ice water. In the military, when your commanding officer prefaced bad news with an apology, it was never a minor inconvenience. Sarah kept her expression neutral, though her mind raced through possibilities. Transfer to a remote outpost? Desk duty? Administrative punishment for some unknown infraction? "You're being reassigned to ground operations, effective immediately," the colonel continued. "Specifically, you'll be handling tarmac coordination and aircraft ground support." Sarah felt the world shift beneath her. Tarmac duty. The assignment was typically reserved for new recruits, personnel recovering from disciplinary action, or those being quietly pushed toward early retirement. For a decorated pilot with her experience, it felt like professional exile. "Sir, may I ask the reasoning behind this decision?" she managed, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside. Colonel Bradley set down his glasses and met her gaze directly. "The official word is that we need experienced personnel overseeing ground operations during the upcoming joint training exercises. Command wants someone with flight experience who understands aircraft requirements from both perspectives." The careful phrasing told Sarah everything she needed to know. This was not about her qualifications or the needs of the mission. Someone higher up the chain of command had made a decision, and Colonel Bradley was simply the messenger. She had seen this before. Capable officers suddenly finding themselves in positions far below their abilities, usually as a prelude to being encouraged to seek opportunities elsewhere. "I understand, sir," she replied, though understanding and accepting were two different things entirely. "Sarah, off the record?" Bradley leaned forward, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "You're one of the finest officers I've had the privilege to serve with. This decision came from above my pay grade, and I want you to know it doesn't reflect your performance or my confidence in your abilities." The informal reassurance, while appreciated, did little to soften the blow. Sarah had worked too hard and sacrificed too much to find herself directing fuel trucks and managing baggage crews. But she was a soldier, and soldiers followed orders, regardless of personal feelings about those orders. "When do I begin, sir?" "Tomorrow morning, 0600 hours. Chief Warrant Officer Thompson will brief you on current operations and introduce you to the ground crew. The exercises begin in 2 weeks, so you'll have time to familiarize yourself with procedures before things get hectic." Sarah stood and saluted crisply. "Thank you, sir. I won't let you down." As she left the colonel's office, Sarah's mind was already shifting into problem-solving mode. If she was going to be stuck on tarmac duty, she would approach it with the same professionalism and attention to detail that had defined her military career. Excellence was not dependent on the assignment. It was a choice made every day, regardless of circumstances. The walk across the base toward her quarters gave her time to process the reality of her situation. Other officers passed by, some offering friendly nods, others averting their eyes. Word traveled fast on a military installation, and she suspected everyone already knew about her reassignment. Some would view it as confirmation that even successful women eventually hit an invisible ceiling. Others might see it as proof that her previous achievements had been overstated. Sarah refused to accept either interpretation. She had faced skepticism and low expectations throughout her career, from basic training instructors who doubted her physical capabilities to fellow pilots who questioned whether she belonged in the cockpit. Each time, she had responded not with anger or resentment, but with performance that spoke louder than any argument. The tarmac would be no different. If command wanted her directing ground operations, she would become the most knowledgeable, efficient, and respected ground operations coordinator on the base. She would master every aspect of aircraft servicing, fuel management, cargo handling, and crew coordination. When the joint training exercises began, her section would operate with precision that reflected credit on everyone involved. That evening, Sarah spent hours researching ground operations procedures, studying technical manuals, and reviewing safety protocols. She familiarized herself with the specific aircraft types that would be involved in the upcoming exercises, their fuel requirements, maintenance schedules, and operational limitations. By the time she went to sleep, she had developed a comprehensive understanding of what her new role would entail. The next morning, Sarah arrived at the tarmac 30 minutes early, her uniform immaculate and her bearing confident. Chief Warrant Officer Thompson, a veteran with 25 years of service, met her near the main hangar. His expression was guarded, clearly wondering what this pilot-turned-ground coordinator might bring to his well-established operation. "Captain Martinez? Chief Thompson, welcome to the ground crew." The introduction was polite, but cool. Sarah understood the dynamic immediately. Thompson had probably worked with pilots before who viewed ground operations as beneath their attention, officers going through the motions while waiting for reassignment to more prestigious duties. She would need to prove that she was different, that she respected the work and the people who did it. "Chief Thompson, thank you for taking the time to orient me. I'm looking forward to learning from your experience and contributing however I can to the mission." Something in her tone seemed to surprise him. The formality was appropriate, but there was genuine respect in her words, not the barely concealed condescension he might have expected from a pilot suddenly finding herself among the ground crew. "Well, Captain, let me show you around and introduce you to the team. We've got good people here, and they take pride in their work. Treat them right, and they'll move mountains for you." As they walked across the tarmac, Thompson explained the current operations tempo, the challenges they faced with equipment maintenance, and the specific requirements for the upcoming joint exercises. Sarah listened carefully, asking questions that demonstrated her genuine interest in understanding not just the procedures, but the reasoning behind them. The ground crew members they met were initially cautious in their interactions with her. Many had worked with officers who viewed ground operations as temporary punishment or stepping stone to better assignments. They had learned to be polite but reserved, protecting themselves from disappointment when yet another officer moved on without acknowledging their contributions. Sarah sensed their wariness and made a mental note to address it through her actions rather than her words. Trust was earned, not demanded, and she was prepared to invest whatever time and effort necessary to prove that she valued their expertise and contributions. By the end of her first week, a subtle shift had begun. Sarah's attention to detail, her willingness to get her hands dirty, and her genuine interest in improving operations had started to break down the barriers. She worked alongside mechanics, learned the intricacies of fuel system management, and demonstrated that no task was beneath her attention if it contributed to mission success. The real test would come with the joint training exercises when visiting aircraft and personnel would strain their capabilities and test their coordination under pressure. Sarah was determined that when that moment arrived, her team would be ready to exceed every expectation. Proving ground 2 weeks in her new assignment, Sarah had established a rhythm that surprised even herself. Each morning brought new challenges as aircraft arrived for maintenance, refueling, and crew changes. What had initially felt like professional exile was transforming into something more meaningful, an opportunity to master an entirely different aspect of military aviation. The ground crew had begun to warm to her leadership style. Unlike previous officers who had treated the assignment as temporary inconvenience, Sarah invested time in understanding each team member's expertise. She learned that Sergeant Rodriguez had 15 years of experience with hydraulic systems, that Airman Chun could diagnose electrical problems by sound alone, and that Corporal Williams had developed innovative techniques for reducing aircraft turnaround time. "Captain, we've got a problem with the fuel line connection on the C-130 that came in last night," Sergeant Rodriguez reported during the morning briefing. "The coupling is damaged, and replacement parts won't arrive until tomorrow." Sarah studied the maintenance report, her mind automatically shifting into problem-solving mode. What are our alternatives? Can we fabricate a temporary solution, or do we need to ground the aircraft? "Well, ma'am, Airman Chun thinks she can rig something using components from the spare parts inventory, but it would require modifying the connection interface. It's not exactly by the book." This was the kind of decision that separated effective leaders from those who simply followed procedures. Sarah weighed the options carefully. The modified repair would return the aircraft to service today, supporting the training schedule. However, any deviation from standard procedures carried risks and required her personal authorization. "Show me the proposed solution," she said. "I want to understand exactly what you're suggesting before we proceed." 20 minutes later, Sarah found herself crawling beneath the aircraft alongside Airman Chun, examining the damaged coupling and the proposed repair. Chin's explanation was thorough and technically sound, demonstrating the kind of practical expertise that came from years of hands-on experience. "The modification will actually strengthen the connection," Chin explained, pointing to specific components. "We're essentially creating a custom interface that addresses the weakness that caused the original failure." Sarah asked detailed questions about stress tolerances, safety margins, and testing procedures. Her flight background allowed her to understand the implications from both operational and safety perspectives. After 30 minutes of examination and discussion, she made her decision. "Proceed with the modification, but I want stress testing completed before we sign off on the repair. Document everything in detail, and I'll take personal responsibility for the deviation from standard procedures." The repair was completed successfully, and the aircraft returned to service that afternoon. Word of Sarah's willingness to make difficult decisions and support her team's expertise began to spread throughout the maintenance community. Officers who backed their people and took responsibility for innovative solutions were rare and valued. 3 days later, the joint training exercises officially began. The base transformed as aircraft from multiple services arrived for the complex multi-week operation. Fighter jets, transport planes, helicopters, and support aircraft filled every available parking space on the expanded tarmac areas. The carefully orchestrated chaos required precise coordination to prevent delays, accidents, or mission failures. Sarah's preparation proved invaluable as her team managed the increased operational tempo without missing a beat. They had rehearsed procedures for handling diverse aircraft types, established communication protocols with visiting crews, and developed contingency plans for common problems. What could have been overwhelming became an opportunity to demonstrate professional excellence. On the 4th day of exercises, Sarah noticed unusual activity around one of the visiting transport aircraft. A small group of senior officers was examining the plane, while ground crew members stood at respectful distances. The aircraft bore markings indicating it belonged to a high-ranking military official, though Sarah couldn't immediately identify the specific passenger. Chief Thompson approached with information that explained the attention. "Captain, we've got a VIP arrival. Retired General Morrison is here to observe the exercises. Word is he's evaluating training effectiveness for a Pentagon review." General Morrison. The name was familiar to anyone who had served in the past 20 years. A decorated combat veteran who had risen through the ranks based on battlefield performance and strategic insight, he was legendary for his attention to detail and intolerance for mediocrity. Officers who impressed General Morrison found their careers accelerated. Those who disappointed him often found themselves reassigned to less visible positions. Where is ground support requirements? Sarah asked, immediately shifting into mission planning mode. Standard VIP protocol, but his aide mentioned the general prefers minimal fuss. Apparently, he likes to move around the base without excessive ceremony or special treatment. Sarah nodded, understanding the balance required. The general's comfort and safety were paramount, but excessive deference or obvious special arrangements would likely irritate a man known for preferring substance over ceremony. Her team would need to provide flawless support while maintaining the appearance of routine operations. The next 2 days passed smoothly as various training scenarios played out across the base. Sarah's team supported dozens of aircraft movements, coordinated fuel deliveries, and managed maintenance requirements with efficiency that drew positive comments from visiting personnel. The complex logistics of the joint exercises were proceeding according to plan, and Sarah felt genuine pride in her team's performance. On the 7th morning of the exercises, everything changed with a single radio transmission. Ground control, we have an emergency fuel leak on the general's aircraft. Request immediate response and assessment. Sarah's heart rate spiked as she grabbed her radio and began coordinating the emergency response. Fuel leaks around aircraft were serious safety hazards that required careful handling to prevent fires or explosions. The fact that this involved the general's aircraft added pressure, but safety protocols remained the same regardless of passenger importance. All personnel, this is Captain Martinez. We have a code yellow fuel emergency on the VIP aircraft. Implementing emergency response procedures immediately. Fire suppression teams to standby positions. Maintenance teams prepare for leak assessment and containment. Within minutes, Sarah was at the aircraft personally overseeing the emergency response. The leak was significant, but not immediately dangerous if handled properly. Her team moved with practiced precision, isolating fuel systems, establishing safety perimeters, and beginning assessment procedures. The general himself appeared during the response, walking toward the aircraft with measured steps despite the obvious urgency of the situation. Sarah found herself in the unusual position of needing to brief a retired 4-star general about the status of his aircraft while managing an active emergency. General Morrison, Captain Martinez, Ground Operations Coordinator. Sir, we have a fuel leak in the port wing system. The aircraft is safe, but we need approximately 4 hours for proper repair and system testing before return to service. The general studied her face as she delivered the briefing, his expression unreadable. Captain, what's your assessment of the repair quality? Are we looking at a temporary fix or a permanent solution? The directness of the question impressed Sarah. Many senior officers would have asked about timing or alternative transportation. General Morrison was focused on the technical quality of the work. Sir, with your permission, I'd like to have our best fuel system specialist examine the problem and provide a detailed assessment before we make repair recommendations. Proceed, Captain. I'll observe if that's acceptable. For the next hour, General Morrison watched as Sarah coordinated the repair effort, consulted with technical specialists, and made decisions about procedures and parts. He said little, but Sarah was aware of his constant attention to how she interacted with her team, made decisions under pressure, and prioritized safety over expedience. The repair was completed successfully, with full system testing confirming the aircraft's airworthiness. As Sarah signed off on the final paperwork, she realized the general was still observing from a position near the maintenance hangar. Their eyes met across the tarmac, and he gave her a slight nod of acknowledgement before walking away. That evening, Chief Thompson approached Sarah with news that would change everything. Captain, I just heard something interesting from the general's aide. Apparently, General Morrison was asking questions about you, your background, your previous assignments, your performance record. The aide seemed to think the general was impressed with how you handled the emergency. Sarah felt a mixture of satisfaction and uncertainty. Impressing General Morrison was an honor, but she had learned to be cautious about reading too much into senior officers' reactions. Still, the knowledge that her performance had been noticed by someone of his stature provided validation that her commitment to excellence was having the intended effect. The exercises continued for another week, with Sarah's team supporting increasingly complex scenarios without incident. Her reputation for competence and reliability had spread throughout the visiting units, and several officers commented on the professionalism of her ground operations. What had begun as unwanted assignment was becoming a source of professional pride and personal growth. Hashtag the unexpected visitor. The final week of joint exercises brought the most complex scenarios yet. Multiple aircraft were launching and recovering simultaneously, testing coordination between services and pushing everyone's capabilities to their limits. Sarah had developed a rhythm that seemed almost effortless to outside observers, but she knew each smooth operation represented hours of preparation and the combined expertise of her entire team. On Wednesday morning, an unscheduled aircraft appeared on the approach radar. The tower contacted Sarah directly, which was unusual since routine arrivals were handled through standard communication channels. Ground control, we have a special arrival requesting immediate ground support upon landing. Aircraft is a modified transport carrying classified equipment. Special arrivals always created complications. The aircraft might require specific handling procedures, unique security protocols, or specialized ground equipment. Sarah's experience with diverse aircraft types during the exercises had prepared her team for unusual requirements, but each situation brought its own challenges. Copy, Tower. Ground Team Alpha is standing by for special arrival. Please advise of any specific requirements or restrictions. The aircraft that touched down 20 minutes later was unlike anything Sarah had seen before. While it appeared to be a standard military transport from the outside, subtle modifications suggested advanced electronic systems or specialized cargo compartments. More intriguingly, the pilot who emerged was wearing the uniform of an experimental test squadron. Captain Martinez? I'm Major Phillips, Test Pilot Division. We need immediate secure parking and power connections for sensitive equipment. This aircraft cannot be approached by unauthorized personnel under any circumstances. Sarah's mind immediately shifted into security and logistics mode. Sensitive equipment meant potential radiation hazards, classified technology, or experimental systems that required special handling. Her team would need to provide support while maintaining strict access control. Understood, Major. We can provide secure parking in Hangar 7 with external power connections and restricted access. What are your specific support requirements? For the next 3 hours, Sarah coordinated the most complex parking and support operation of her career. The aircraft required specialized power connections that had to be fabricated on site, electromagnetic shielding to prevent interference with base communications, and a security perimeter that excluded even routine maintenance personnel. The operation proceeded flawlessly, demonstrating her team's ability to adapt to unprecedented requirements. Major Phillips was clearly impressed with their professionalism and flexibility, commenting that most ground teams would have required twice the time and created multiple complications during the process. As the aircraft was secured and the test team began their work inside the hangar, Sarah was reviewing paperwork when Chief Thompson approached with an expression she couldn't immediately interpret. Captain, you're not going to believe who just arrived to observe our operation. Before she could ask for clarification, Thompson pointed toward the main gate where a government sedan was approaching. The vehicle's official markings and escort suggested VIP transportation, but it wasn't until the passenger emerged that Sarah understood the significance. General Morrison had returned, this time accompanied by 2 other senior officers she didn't recognize. More importantly, he was walking directly toward her position with obvious purpose. This was not a casual observation visit. The general had specific business with her ground operations team. Captain Martinez, General Morrison said as he approached, his voice carrying the authority that came with decades of command experience. I hope you have a few minutes to speak privately. I have some questions about your operations here. Sarah felt her pulse quicken, but maintained her professional composure. Of course, General. Would you prefer to speak in my office, or would you like a tour of our operations first? Let's walk and talk, Captain. I find I learn more about people when they're showing me their work rather than sitting behind desks. For the next hour, General Morrison asked detailed questions about everything from maintenance procedures to personnel management. His inquiries revealed an extraordinary depth of knowledge about ground operations, suggesting either extensive research or personal experience with similar challenges. Sarah answered each question honestly, explaining her decision-making processes and the reasoning behind various improvements her team had implemented. "Captain, I've been observing your operation for 2 weeks now, both officially and unofficially," the general said as they paused near the main hangar. "Your team's performance during the exercises has been exceptional, particularly considering you took over this assignment only a month ago. That kind of rapid improvement doesn't happen by accident." "Thank you, sir. I've been fortunate to work with an outstanding team. Chief Thompson and the crew members brought years of experience to every operation. Leadership is about maximizing the potential of good people, Captain. Your predecessor had access to the same team for 18 months, yet their performance under your leadership is measurably superior. That tells me something important about your capabilities." The conversation was moving in a direction Sarah hadn't anticipated. General Morrison's comments suggested he had been conducting some form of evaluation, comparing her performance to previous ground operations coordinators. She wondered what criteria he was using and what conclusions he was reaching. "Sir, may I ask about your interest in our operations? Is this part of the Pentagon review Chief Thompson mentioned?" General Morrison paused before answering, studying her face with the intensity that had made him legendary for reading people's character. "Captain, I'm going to share something with you that's not yet public information. The military is implementing new joint operations protocols that will require exceptional coordination between air and ground elements. We're looking for officers who can bridge those domains effectively." The implications of his statement began to register. Joint operations protocols suggested expanded roles for officers with both flight and ground experience. The military was recognizing that future conflicts would require leaders who understood aviation from multiple perspectives, not just pilots who occasionally dealt with ground support issues. These new protocols will require officers who can think strategically about air operations while managing complex ground logistics, the general continued. "Your background as a pilot combined with your demonstrated excellence in ground operations makes you an ideal candidate for these expanded responsibilities." Sarah felt excitement building despite her efforts to remain professionally composed. The assignment that had initially felt like career exile was beginning to appear as preparation for opportunities she hadn't imagined possible. Her willingness to excel in ground operations, rather than simply endure them, had positioned her for advancement rather than stagnation. "General, I appreciate your confidence in my abilities. Whatever the military needs from me, I'm prepared to serve to the best of my capabilities." "I'd hoped you would say that, Captain. There's a special assignment becoming available that would utilize your unique skill set. It would mean leaving this base and taking on responsibilities that would challenge everything you've learned about leadership and operations management." The conversation was interrupted by the approach of one of the officers who had accompanied General Morrison. "General, excuse the interruption, but we need to leave for the afternoon briefing in 10 minutes. General Morrison nodded to his aide before turning back to Sarah. "Captain, I want you to think carefully about what we've discussed. The opportunity one mentioned would represent a significant career advancement, but it would also place you in situations where failure is not acceptable. Take some time to consider whether you're ready for that level of responsibility." As the general's vehicle departed, Sarah found herself standing on the tarmac with her mind racing. The conversation had transformed her understanding of her current situation and opened possibilities she had never considered. What had begun as unwanted punishment assignment was revealing itself as preparation for opportunities that could define her entire career. Chief Thompson approached as she watched the sedan disappear beyond the main gate. "Captain, I couldn't help but notice the general spent considerable time with you. That's not typical behavior for someone conducting routine observations." "Chief, I think we may have been part of something larger than routine exercises. General Morrison suggested there are new opportunities developing that would require officers with our combined experience. That evening, Sarah spent hours considering the general's words and their implications. The special assignment he mentioned could represent the career opportunity of a lifetime, but it would also mean leaving behind the team and operations she had worked so hard to develop. More importantly, it would test her abilities in ways that her current assignment, challenging as it had been, could not prepare her for. The weight of the decision ahead felt enormous, but Sarah realized that the choice was not really about accepting or declining an opportunity. It was about whether she had the courage to continue growing as a leader and an officer, even when that growth required stepping into the unknown once again. Hashtag the moment of truth. 3 days passed before Sarah received the call she had been anticipating and dreading in equal measure. Colonel Bradley's voice was carefully neutral when he requested her immediate presence in his office, but something in his tone suggested this meeting would be different from their previous conversation about her reassignment. Walking across the base toward headquarters, Sarah noticed how different everything felt compared to her first day on tarmac duty. The ground crew members she passed offered respectful nods and genuine smiles. The aircraft lined up for maintenance represented challenges she had learned to solve efficiently. What had once felt like exile now felt like home territory. Captain Martinez reporting as ordered, sir, she announced upon entering Colonel Bradley's office. Sarah, please sit down. We have some important matters to discuss. The colonel's use of her first name immediately indicated this would be an informal conversation despite the formal setting. I've received some interesting communications over the past few days, all concerning your performance and future assignments. Sarah maintained her professional posture while her mind raced through possibilities. General Morrison's interest in her operations had been clear, but she hadn't expected immediate action on whatever opportunity he had mentioned. Military assignments typically moved slowly through bureaucratic channels, especially those involving specialized positions or advancement. First, I want you to know that your work over the past month has been exceptional. The ground operations efficiency reports show improvements across every measurable category. More importantly, I've received unsolicited comments from visiting personnel about the professionalism and competence of our ground support team. The validation felt good, but Sarah sensed there was more to this conversation than performance recognition. Colonel Bradley's careful phrasing suggested he was building toward something more significant than routine praise for good work. Second, and this is where things get interesting, I've been contacted by General Morrison's staff about your potential availability for special assignment. Apparently, your conversation with the general made quite an impression. Sarah felt her heart rate increase despite her efforts to remain calm. Special assignments from general officer level typically represented either extraordinary opportunity or extraordinary challenge. Often, they represented both simultaneously, requiring officers to prove themselves under conditions where success would advance their careers and failure would end them. The assignment involved coordinating joint air-ground operations for a classified mission that I'm not authorized to discuss in detail. What I can tell you is that it would require immediate transfer to a different installation, advanced training in systems you haven't worked with before, and responsibility for operations that could affect national security interests. The scope of what Colonel Bradley was describing began to register. This was not simply a promotion or routine transfer. It was an opportunity to work at levels of military operations that few officers ever experienced. The classification level alone suggested involvement in missions that remained hidden from public view and most military personnel. Sarah, I'm going to be completely honest with you about something. When I assigned you to ground operations, I was following orders from above my authority level. I believed then, and I believe now, that the assignment was unjust given your qualifications and performance record. However, what I couldn't have predicted was how you would respond to that situation. The admission surprised Sarah, though it confirmed suspicions she had harbored about the politics behind her reassignment. More importantly, Colonel Bradley seemed to be suggesting that her response to unfair treatment had ultimately created opportunities rather than limitations. Your willingness to excel in ground operations, rather than simply endure them, demonstrated something that doesn't appear on fitness reports or performance evaluations. It showed character, adaptability, and the kind of leadership potential that senior commanders value above technical skills or specialized knowledge. Before Sarah could respond, Colonel Bradley's phone rang. After a brief conversation, he hung up and looked at her with an expression she couldn't interpret. That was General Morrison's office. The general would like to speak with you personally this afternoon about the special assignment. Apparently, there's some urgency to filling this position. The afternoon meeting was scheduled for 1,400 hours in the base commander's conference room, suggesting a level of formality that exceeded Sarah's previous conversation with General Morrison. She spent the intervening hours reviewing her personal records, ensuring her uniform was perfect, and mentally preparing for what could be the most important discussion of her military career. At precisely 1,400 hours, Sarah presented herself at the conference room, where she found not only General Morrison, but also two other senior officers she recognized from intelligence and special operations communities. The presence of multiple general officers indicated this assignment was more significant than she had initially understood. Captain Martinez, thank you for making time to discuss this opportunity. General Morrison began without preamble. I'll be direct about what we're offering and what we expect in return. The position involves coordinating support for joint special operations missions in classified locations. You would be responsible for ensuring that air and ground elements work seamlessly under conditions where coordination failures could result in mission failure or personnel casualties. The weight of responsibility being described was enormous. Special operations missions operated with minimal margin for error, and the coordination role General Morrison was describing would place her at the center of life and death decisions involving highly trained personnel conducting critical missions. The assignment would begin with 8 weeks of intensive training at multiple facilities where you would learn advanced coordination protocols, work with classified communication systems, and train alongside special operations personnel. Following training, you would be assigned to support active operations in locations I cannot discuss in an unsecured environment. One of the other officers, whom General Morrison introduced as General Patterson from Special Operations Command, took over the briefing. Captain, this position typically goes to officers with 10 to 15 years of specialized experience in joint operations. We're considering you because your recent performance suggests you have the adaptability and leadership skills necessary to succeed despite having a non-traditional background. The conversation continued for 90 minutes as the three generals described the assignment's requirements, challenges, and opportunities. Sarah asked detailed questions about training expectations, operational responsibilities, and career progression pathways. Throughout the discussion, she maintained professional composure while internally marveling at the surreal nature of being recruited by general officers for assignments she had never imagined existed. Captain, we need your decision within 24 hours, General Morrison concluded. If you accept, orders will be cut immediately for your transfer and training assignment. If you decline, there will be no negative implications for your career, but this opportunity will not be offered again. Walking back to her quarters after the meeting, Sarah felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of the choice before her. Accepting would mean leaving behind the team and operations she had worked so hard to develop, entering a world of classified missions and enormous responsibility, and proving herself in an environment where failure could have consequences far beyond her personal career. Declining would mean remaining in familiar territory, continuing to build on the success she had achieved in ground operations, and avoiding the risks associated with special assignment responsibilities. It would be the safer choice, but it would also mean wondering for the rest of her career about opportunities not pursued. That evening, Sarah called her mentor from flight school, Lieutenant Colonel, retired Janet Walsh, who had navigated her own share of difficult career decisions during 25 years of military service. Their conversation lasted 3 hours as they discussed the implications, risks, and potential rewards of the opportunity Sarah had been offered. Sarah, the question isn't whether you're qualified for this assignment, Lieutenant Colonel Walsh said as their conversation drew to a close. The question is whether you're ready to discover what you're truly capable of accomplishing when everything depends on your performance. That kind of opportunity is rare and precious, even when it's terrifying. By morning, Sarah had reached her decision. The choice between security and growth was not really a choice at all for someone who had spent her entire military career pushing beyond comfortable boundaries. She would accept the assignment and whatever challenges came with it. #recognition earned Sarah stood in Colonel Bradley's office at 0800 hours the next morning, her decision made and her mind clear about the path ahead. The night of consideration had convinced her that accepting General Morrison's offer was not just the right choice, but the only choice consistent with her commitment to serving at the highest level of her capabilities. "Sir, I made my decision about the special assignment. I accept the opportunity and am ready to begin whatever training or transition is required." Colonel Bradley smiled, the first genuinely pleased expression she had seen from him since her initial reassignment to ground operations. "Sarah, I hoped you would make that choice, though I understand it couldn't have been easy. You'll be leaving behind excellent work and a team that has come to respect your leadership." The administrative details moved with surprising speed. Within hours, Sarah's orders were cut for immediate transfer to the first training facility. Her clearance upgrades were initiated, and arrangements were made for the transition of her ground operations responsibilities to Chief Thompson, who would assume temporary coordination duties until a permanent replacement arrived. The most difficult part of the transition was saying goodbye to the ground crew members who had become not just colleagues, but friends. These were the people who had taught her the practical realities of aircraft maintenance, fuel system management, and the 100 small details that made complex operations appear effortless. "Captain, it's been an honor working with you," Sergeant Rodriguez said as the team gathered for an informal farewell. "You came here as a pilot who got stuck with ground duty, but you became one of us. That means something to people who've been doing this work for years." Airman Chin stepped forward with a small wrapped package. "Ma'am, this is from all of us. We wanted you to have something to remember your time with the ground crew." Inside the wrapping was a meticulously crafted model of the damaged C-130 they had repaired together during Sarah's second week on the job. Every detail was perfect, down to the modified fuel coupling that had required innovative thinking and precise execution. More touching were the signatures of every team member on the base of the model, along with a simple inscription, "To Captain Martinez, excellence in leadership, Ground Team Alpha." The gift represented more than craftsmanship. It represented acceptance and recognition from professionals who had initially viewed her assignment with skepticism. Sarah felt emotion threatening to overwhelm her professional composure as she realized how much this team's respect meant to her. "Thank you all," she managed. "Working with you has taught me more about leadership and excellence than any formal training ever could. I'll carry those lessons with me wherever this assignment takes me." 3 days later, Sarah found herself at a nondescript government facility where her advanced training would begin. The 8-week program was unlike anything in her previous military experience, combining classroom instruction on joint operations protocols with practical exercises using equipment she had never imagined existed. Her fellow trainees were an extraordinary group: Special Forces officers with multiple combat deployments, intelligence specialists with advanced technical qualifications, and pilots from elite units she had only heard about in rumors. Initially, Sarah wondered if she belonged among such accomplished personnel, but her recent experience with ground operations provided perspectives that complemented rather than competed with their specialized skills. The training pushed everyone to their limits as they learned to coordinate complex operations under simulated combat conditions. Sarah discovered that her unique background, combining flight experience with recent ground operations expertise, made her particularly effective at bridging communication gaps between different operational communities. Halfway through training, the instructors introduced a scenario that would test everything they had learned. Teams of trainees were required to coordinate a simulated mission involving multiple aircraft types, ground support elements, and special operations personnel operating in hostile territory. Success required flawless communication, precise timing, and the ability to adapt when inevitably something went wrong. Sarah found herself designated as the primary coordinator for her team's mission, responsible for ensuring that air and ground elements work together seamlessly. The scenario was designed to create multiple crisis points where coordination failures would cascade into mission failure, testing each coordinator's ability to maintain situational awareness and make critical decisions under pressure. The exercise lasted 18 hours and included every type of complication the instructors could devise: equipment failures, communication breakdowns, weather changes, and simulated enemy actions. Sarah's team not only completed their mission successfully, but did so with efficiency that impressed even their experienced instructors. Captain Martinez, the lead instructor, commented during the after-action review, "Your coordination during the fuel system crisis demonstrated exactly the kind of thinking we need in operational environments. You understood both the technical requirements and the tactical implications, allowing you to make decisions that kept the mission on track." The recognition felt familiar, reminding Sarah of similar comments about her ground operations performance. Excellence she was learning was transferable across different assignments and responsibilities. The attention to detail, commitment to understanding complex systems, and willingness to take responsibility for difficult decisions served her well regardless of the specific context. Training concluded with individual evaluations and assignment notifications. Sarah learned she would be assigned to coordinate support for classified operations in a location she could not discuss with anyone lacking appropriate clearance. The responsibility was enormous, but her confidence had grown throughout the training program as she proved her ability to master new challenges. On her final day at the training facility, Sarah received an unexpected visitor. General Morrison appeared at the graduation ceremony, personally congratulating each new graduate and discussing their upcoming assignments. When he reached Sarah, his comments carried particular significance. "Captain Martinez, I want you to know that recommending you for this program was one of the best personnel decisions I've made in recent years. Your performance during training confirms what I observed during your ground operations assignment. You have the rare ability to excel in any situation by focusing on mission requirements rather than personal preferences." The general paused, seeming to consider his next words carefully. "Your journey from pilot to ground operations coordinator to special assignment officer demonstrates something important about adaptability and leadership. Many officers resist assignments they consider beneath their qualifications. You embraced such an assignment and transformed it into preparation for greater responsibilities." As the ceremony concluded and Sarah prepared for her next assignment, she reflected on the unexpected path that had brought her to this moment. What had begun as career setback had become career advancement through her willingness to pursue excellence regardless of circumstances. The lesson was simple but profound. How you respond to unwanted assignments often matters more than the assignments themselves. The tarmac duty that had initially felt like punishment had become the foundation for opportunities she could never have imagined. Every challenge mastered, every relationship built, and every problem solved had contributed to her development as a leader capable of coordinating complex operations under the most demanding conditions. 6 months later, Sarah received a letter from Chief Thompson updating her on-ground operations at her former base. The team continued to excel, building on foundations they had established together. More importantly, Thompson reported that 2 ground crew members had applied for officer training programs, inspired by their experience working with a leader who valued their expertise and contributions. The letter reminded Sarah that excellence creates ripple effects extending far beyond individual assignments or personal advancement. Her commitment to performing ground operations with the same dedication she brought to flying had influenced not only her own career, but also the aspirations of people who worked with her. Standing on another tarmac at a classified location, coordinating support for missions she could never discuss publicly, Sarah understood that General Morrison's recognition had been based not on her qualifications or potential, but on her character demonstrated under challenging circumstances. The moment he dropped his cane had been a metaphor for the barriers that fell when talent was recognized regardless of temporary assignments or conventional expectations. The assignment that was meant to limit her career had instead expanded it beyond anything she had previously imagined possible. Excellence, pursued consistently and without regard for external recognition, had created opportunities that no amount of political maneuvering or career strategizing could have achieved. Her story would inspire other officers facing similar challenges, demonstrating that setbacks can become setups for greater success when approached with the right attitude and unwavering commitment to professional excellence. The tarmac had been her proving ground, and she had proven herself worthy of recognition from the highest levels of military leadership.